Hey guys, Lord Naren White, the Holy Ghost, the one true God here. Back with you with the next video in my series reading Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Oliver Twist as read by Lord Naren White.
"Don't leave us in the dark,"
said Kaggs, taking down a candle from the chimney-piece and lighting it with such a trembling hand that the knocking was twice repeated before he had finished. Crackit went down to the door and returned, followed by a man with the lower part of his face buried in a handkerchief, and another over his head under his hat. He drew them slowly off, blanched face, sunken eyes, hollow cheeks, beard of 3 days' growth, wasted flesh, short thick breath. It was the very ghost of Sikes. He laid his hand upon a chair which stood in the middle of the room, but shuddering as he was about to drop into it, and seeming to glance over his shoulder, dragged it back close to the wall, as close as it would go, and ground it against it, and sat down. Not a word had been exchanged. He looked from one to another in silence. If an eye were furtively raised and met his, it was instantly averted. When his hollow voice broke silence, they all three started. They seemed never to have heard its tones before.
"How came that dog here?"
he asked.
"Alone, 3 hours ago. Tonight's paper says that Fagin's took. Is it true or a lie?"
"True." They were silent again.
"Damn you all," said
Sikes, passing his hand across his forehead.
"Have you nothing to say to me?"
There was an uneasy moment among them, but nobody spoke.
You that keep this house,"
said Sikes, turning his face to Crackit.
"Do you mean to sell me, or to let me lie here till the hunt is over?"
"You may stop here if you think it safe," returned the person addressed, after some hesitation. Sikes carried his eyes slowly up the wall behind him, rather than trying to turn his head than actually doing it, and said,
Is it the body? Is it buried?"
They shook their heads.
"Why isn't it?"
he retorted with the same glance behind him.
"What do they keep such ugly things above the ground for? Who's that knocking?"
Crackit intimated by a motion of his hand as he left the room that there was nothing to fear, and directly came back with Charlie Bates behind him. Sikes sat opposite the door, so that the moment the boy entered the room he encountered his figure.
"Toby,"
said the boy, falling back, as Sikes turned his eyes towards him.
"Why didn't you tell me this downstairs?"
There had been something so tremendous in the shrinking off of the three that the wretched man was willing to propitiate even this lad. Accordingly he nodded, and made as though he would shake hands with him.
"Let me go into some other room,"
said the boy, retreating still farther.
"Charlie,"
said Sikes, stepping forward.
Don't you know me? Don't come nearer me,"
answered the boy, still retreating, and looking with horror in his eyes upon the murderer's face.
"You monster!"
The man stopped halfway, and they looked at each other, but Sikes's eyes sunk gradually to the ground.
"Witness you three,"
cried the boy, shaking his clenched fist, and becoming more and more excited as he spoke.
"Witness you three. I'm not afraid of him. If they come here after him, I'll give him up. I will. I tell you out at once. He may kill me for it if he likes, or if he dares. But if I'm here, I'll give him up. I'd give him up if he was to be boiled alive. Murder! Help! If there's the pluck of a man among you three, you'll help me. Murder! Help! Down with him!"
pouring out these cries and accompanying them with violent gesticulation. The boy actually threw himself single-handed upon the strong man, and in the intensity of his energy and the suddenness of his surprise, brought him heavily to the ground. The three spectators seemed quite stupefied. They offered no interference, and the boy and man rolled on the ground together. The former, heedless of the blows that showered upon him, wrenching his hands tighter and tighter in the garments about the murderer's breast, and never ceasing to call for help with all his might. The contest, however, was too unequal to last long. Sikes had him down, and his knee was on his throat, when Crackit pulled him back with a look of alarm, and pointed to the window. There were lights gleaming below, voices in loud and earnest conversation, the tramp of hurried footsteps, endless they seemed in number, crossing the nearest wooden bridge. One man on horseback seemed to be among the crowd, for there was the noise of hoofs rattling on the uneven pavement. The gleam of lights increased. The footsteps came more thickly and noisily on. Then came a loud knocking at the door, and then a hoarse murmur from such a multitude of angry voices as would have made the boldest quail. "Help!" shrieked the boy, in a voice that rent the air. "He's here! Break down the door!" "In the king's name!" cried the voices out, and the hoarse cry arose again, but louder. "Break down the door!" screamed the boy. "I tell you they'll never open it. Run straight to the room where the light is. Break down the door!" Strokes, thick and heavy, rattled upon the door and lower window shutters as he ceased to speak, and a loud huzzah burst from the crowd, giving the listener, for the first time, some adequate idea of its immense extent. "Open the door of some place where I can lock this screeching hell babe," cried Sikes fiercely, running to and fro, and dragging the boy now as easily as if he were an empty sack. "That door, quick!" He flung him in, bolted it, and turned the key. "Is the downstairs doors fast?" "Double locked and chained," replied Crackit, who, with the other two men, still remained helpless and bewildered. "The panels, are they strong?" "Lined with sheet iron. And the windows too?" "Yes, and the windows." "Damn you!" cried the desperate ruffian, throwing up the sash and menacing the crowd. "Do your worst, I'll cheat you yet." Of all the terrific yells that ever fell on mortal ears, none could exceed the cry of the infuriated throng. Some shouted to those who were nearest to set the house on fire. Others roared to the officers to shoot him dead. Among them all, none showed such fury as the man on horseback, who, throwing himself out of the saddle, and bursting through the crowd as if he were parting water, cried, beneath the window, in a voice that rose above all others, 20 guineas to the man who brings a ladder." The nearest voices took up the cry, and hundreds echoed it. Some called for ladders, some for sledgehammers, some ran with torches to and fro as if to seek them, and still came back and roared again. Some spent their breath in impotent curses and execrations. Some pressed forward with the ecstasy of madmen, and thus impeded the progress of those below. Some among the boldest attempted to climb up by the water spout and the crevices in the wall, and all waved to and fro in the darkness beneath, like a field of corn moved by an angry wind, and joined from time to time in one loud, furious roar. "The tide!" cried the murderer, as he staggered back into the room, and shut the faces out. "The tide was in as I came up. Give me a rope, a long rope. They're all in front. I may drop into the folly ditch and clear off that way.
Give me a rope, or I shall do 3 more murders and kill myself.
The panic-stricken men pointed to where such articles were kept. The murderer, hastily selecting the longest and strongest cord, hurried up to the housetop. And we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe,
as it greatly helps the channel.
Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.